Victor Mensah was a man who had everything money could buy and nothing that actually mattered. The night he decided to buy a child, the rain wouldn't stop falling. At 40 years old, he stood in his penthouse overlooking the glittering lights of Accra, surrounded by luxury that felt more like a prison than paradise. 2 failed marriages behind him. No children. No legacy. Just wealth that grew bigger every year while his heart grew smaller. Before we continue, just one quick favor. If this kind of story touches your heart, please hit the like button, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from in the comments. I read every single one, and I'll be giving shout-outs in the next video. Today's shout-outs go to Jennifer Clark from New York, Sophia from Jamaica, Fatu from Gambia, and Sharon from Chicago. Now, back to our story. His ex-wives had taught him brutal lessons. They'd loved his bank account, not his soul. They'd smiled at the jewelry and the vacations, but their eyes glazed over when he talked about building something meaningful. When the divorces came, they took millions without a second thought. Love, he decided, was just another transaction where he always ended up paying too much. So tonight, staring at his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows, Victor made a decision that would change everything. If he couldn't trust love, he'd do what he did best. He'd make a deal. A business transaction. He would pay someone to give him what he wanted most. An heir. Someone to carry on his name. And when it was done, they'd both walk away. Clean. Simple. Transactional. He grabbed his coat and left the penthouse, driving into the rainy Accra night with a plan that felt cold and calculated and safe. The streets were slick with rain. Vendors hurried to pack up their goods, covering their stalls with plastic sheets as the storm intensified. Victor's Mercedes crawled through traffic, his wipers working overtime against the downpour. He wasn't looking for anything in particular. He was just driving, thinking, planning his next move. Then he saw her. A young woman sat on a wooden stool at the edge of the street, surrounded by sketches laid out on pieces of wet cardboard. She was thin, wearing a faded dress that clung to her body from the rain. Her hair was plastered to her face, but she wasn't running for shelter like everyone else. Instead, she was desperately trying to cover her drawings with her body, sacrificing herself to protect her art. Victor slowed the car, watching. Something about the scene made him pause. A woman and a young boy approached the artist through the rain. The boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, held out crumpled bills in his small hand. His mother stood behind him, both of them soaked to the bone. "Please, Ma," the boy said, his voice barely audible over the rain. "One drawing. For my sister's birthday." The woman on the stool looked at the money, then at the boy, then up at the darkening sky. For a moment, Victor thought she would refuse. She was clearly starving, clearly desperate. Those bills might be her only sale of the day. But then she did something that stopped Victor's heart. She reached into her worn cloth bag and pulled out a small umbrella. The only umbrella she had. She opened it and handed it to the boy. "Keep your money," she said softly. "Take this instead. Make sure your sister stays dry on her birthday." The mother's eyes filled with tears. She tried to refuse, but the young woman insisted, pressing the umbrella into the boy's hands. They left, the umbrella bobbing away into the rain, and the woman sat back down on her stool, now completely exposed to the storm. She didn't have another umbrella. She'd given away her only protection, and her drawings were starting to bleed and run as the rain intensified. Victor sat in his car, engine idling, watching this woman choose someone else's comfort over her own survival. In his world, nobody did that. Nobody gave away their last defense. Nobody chose kindness when they were drowning themselves. He stepped out of the Mercedes. The rain immediately soaked through his expensive suit, but he didn't care. He walked straight to her stall. "You just gave away your umbrella," he said. The woman looked up, startled. Her eyes were tired but clear, defeated but dignified. She was younger than he'd thought, maybe mid-20s, and despite the exhaustion etched into her face, there was something unbreakable about her. "He needed it more than I do," she replied simply. "And your drawings are getting ruined." She glanced down at her artwork, watching the ink bleed into watercolor puddles. She smiled, but it was the saddest smile Victor had ever seen. "I'll make new ones tomorrow." Victor studied her face. She wasn't begging for sympathy, wasn't angling for charity. She'd made her choice and accepted the consequences without complaint. That was something he never saw in his world. Integrity without calculation. "What's your name?" he asked. "Naomi." "Naomi, adieu." "Naomi, I want to make you an offer that could change your life forever." She looked at him with suspicion and confusion. A wealthy man in the rain, speaking to her like she mattered. She'd probably learned to be wary of offers that sounded too good to be true. "I don't understand," she said carefully. "Come with me. Out of the rain. Let me explain." She hesitated for a long moment, looking between her ruined sketches and this stranger in an expensive suit. Finally, she gathered what was left of her artwork and followed him to the car. They sat in a quiet corner of an upscale cafe. Naomi looked completely out of place in her wet, threadbare dress, but she sat with her spine straight and her chin up. She wasn't ashamed. She was just aware of the distance between their worlds. Victor didn't believe in easing into difficult conversations. He'd learned in business that the direct approach saved everyone time and confusion. "I need someone to carry my child," he said. "No marriage. No romance. Just a contract. You'll live in my estate with full medical care, the best doctors, everything you need. And when the baby is born, you'll receive 500,000 cedis. After that, you're free to go. Free to do whatever you want with your life." Naomi stared at him like he'd just spoken in a language she didn't understand. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. "You want to pay me to have your baby?" "Yes." "Why me?" "Because you gave away your umbrella." She blinked several times, processing. "I don't understand what that has to do with anything." "You will. Or you won't. Either way, that's my offer. Take your time to think about it." Naomi shook her head slowly, and for the first time, anger flashed in her eyes. Not rage. Just offense. The kind of anger that comes from dignity being trampled. "I'm not for sale, Mr. Mensah. Victor Mensah. Mr. Mensah, I'm not for sale." She stood up and walked out of the cafe without looking back. Victor watched her go. He didn't follow, didn't try to convince her. He'd planted the seed. He'd made the offer. Now he'd wait. People always came back when desperation outweighed pride. 3 days later, Naomi stood outside the women's shelter where she'd been living for the past 8 months. She watched as the landlord hammered an eviction notice to the front door with angry, violent strikes. "Everyone out by Friday," he shouted over the noise of crying women and scared children. "I'm selling this property. You have 3 days." Women poured out onto the steps, some holding babies, others dragging frightened toddlers by the hand. Some were elderly, moving slowly with canes and walkers. Naomi helped an old woman named Auntie Si carry her bags down the stairs. "Where will we go?" Auntie Si whispered, her voice trembling. Naomi's throat was tight. "I don't know, Auntie. I don't know." That night, Naomi lay on her thin mat in the corner of the shelter, surrounded by the sounds of restless children and crying babies. By Friday, all these women and children would be sleeping on the streets. No roof, no protection, no hope. She thought about Victor's offer. 500,000 cedis. She could do so much with that money. She could help these women, these children, the forgotten people nobody else saw. She sat up and pulled out a small, battered notebook from under her mat. In the dim light, she began writing names. Grace, the pregnant 17-year-old abandoned by her family. Amma, the 9-year-old with the infected leg who couldn't afford surgery. Nana, the 12-year-old artist with no money for school. Accra, the single mother of 4 facing eviction. ESI, the 8-year-old orphan who couldn't see the blackboard. Page after page of names. Women and children who needed help, who needed someone to see them. Naomi made her decision. Not for herself, for them. 2 days later, she stood outside Victor's office building in the business district of Accra. The glass tower stretched impossibly high above her. She took a deep breath, smoothed down her dress, and walked inside. His assistant led her to a top-floor office with views of the entire city. Victor looked up from his desk, completely unsurprised to see her. "You came back," he said. "I'll do it," Naomi replied. Her voice was steady. "But I have one condition." Victor leaned back in his leather chair. "I'm listening. No questions about what I do with the money. Ever. Not now, not later, not when the baby is born. What I do with it is my business." He studied her face for a long moment. "That's your only condition?" "Yes." "Why?" "You said no questions." Victor smiled for the first time since she'd met him. It was small, almost invisible, but it was there. "Fair enough. We have a deal." He slid a thick contract across the mahogany desk. Naomi read every single word carefully. Her hands trembled slightly, but her expression remained determined. When she reached the last page, she picked up the pen and signed her name. "When do I move in?" she asked. "Today. Mrs. Dopper will take you to the estate." As Naomi stood to leave, Victor called out to her. "Naomi!" She turned. "Why did you really come back?" She met his eyes without flinching. "Because sometimes we have to make deals with the devil to do God's work." She walked out, leaving Victor alone in his office with those words echoing in the silence. The estate was like something from a dream. Or a movie. Rolling green lawns stretched as far as Naomi could see. Gardens filled with flowers she couldn't name. A massive house with more rooms than she could count. Marble floors. Crystal chandeliers. Windows everywhere letting in golden afternoon light. Mrs. Dopper, a stern-looking woman in her 50s with kind eyes, showed Naomi to her room. It was bigger than the entire shelter. The bed alone could have fit 5 people. "Master Victor's rules are simple," Mrs. Dopper explained. "No going through his personal spaces. No visitors without permission. And you eat well and rest. That's your only job now. To be healthy." "Yes, Ma," Naomi whispered. Mrs. Dopper's expression softened just slightly. "He's not a bad man, child. Just a lonely one." That night, Naomi sat on the edge of the enormous bed, overwhelmed by the silence and space. She pulled out her notebook and began writing. Plans. Calculations. How to stretch 500,000 cedis to help as many people as possible. Every cedi accounted for. not one wasted on herself. She didn't know that Victor stood in the hallway outside, watching through the cracked door, wondering what she was writing so intensely. Weeks passed. Naomi kept to herself, polite but distant. She attended her doctor's appointments, ate the meals Mrs. Dopper prepared, and spent hours in her room. Victor respected the boundary between them, only checking in occasionally to make sure she was healthy. Then one morning, Naomi found something waiting outside her door. It was a room she'd never seen before, transformed into an art studio. Canvases lined the walls. Professional-grade paints sat organized on shelves. Brushes of every size waited in ceramic jars. An easel stood by the window, perfectly positioned to catch the morning light over the gardens. Mrs. Dopper appeared behind her, smiling. "Master Victor set this up for you. He noticed your sketches when you first arrived." Naomi's throat closed up. For the first time since she'd come to the estate, tears filled her eyes and spilled down her cheeks. "Why would he do this?" she whispered. "Like I told you, child. He's not a bad man." That afternoon, Naomi painted for the first time in years. Not to survive, not to sell, just to create, just for herself. The brush moved across the canvas like breathing, releasing something inside her that had been locked away for too long. Victor walked past the studio and paused, watching her through the window. She was smiling, actually smiling. Her whole face was transformed by joy. Something warm stirred in his chest. Something he thought had died during his second divorce. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Naomi's belly grew round and full, and slowly, unexpectedly, a friendship developed between her and Victor. They began having breakfast together on the terrace, watching the sun rise over the gardens. She would paint in her studio while he worked on his laptop nearby, both of them existing in comfortable silence. Sometimes they'd talk about small things. Her childhood, his business, the weather, safe topics that didn't require vulnerability. One evening, Victor found her in the garden, both hands resting on her swollen belly. She looked peaceful, complete. "Twins," she said softly when she noticed him. "The doctor confirmed it today." Victor's eyes went wide. "Twins. Is that a problem?" "No. No, it's—" He trailed off, then laughed. Actually laughed, loud and genuine. "It's perfect. It's more than I ever hoped for." Naomi smiled at him. "You should laugh more often. It suits you." "I haven't had much to laugh about," he admitted. "Until recently." Their eyes met across the garden. Something unspoken passed between them, something neither of them was ready to name. Then the moment broke as Mrs. Dopper called them in for dinner, and they went inside, the tension still hanging in the air like smoke. But not everyone was happy about Naomi's presence in Victor's life. His younger sister, Adeline, arrived unannounced one Saturday afternoon in a Mercedes even newer than Victor's. She stepped out wearing designer everything. Gucci sunglasses, Louis Vuitton handbag, jewelry that cost more than most people earned in a year. She found Naomi in the garden and looked her up and down with barely concealed disgust. "So you're the woman my brother hired to carry his children." "I'm Naomi," she replied calmly. "I know who you are. What I don't know is what game you're playing." Victor appeared in the garden doorway. "Adeline, that's enough. Don't enough me, Victor. You don't even know this woman. You met her on a street corner, and now she's living in your house, pregnant with your children. Do you have any idea how this looks?" "I don't care how it looks." "Well, I do. I care about you, even if you don't care about yourself. Adeline turned back to Naomi, her eyes cold. I'm watching you. One wrong move, one suspicious transaction, and I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you are. She left in a cloud of expensive perfume, her heels clicking angrily against the marble floors. Naomi stood frozen in the garden. Victor approached her carefully. Don't worry about Adeline. She's just protective. She's right to be suspicious, Naomi said quietly. You don't really know me. You don't know where I came from or what I'm doing with your money. I know enough. But doubt had been planted, and Adeline wasn't finished. 2 weeks later, Adeline returned to Victor's downtown office and slammed a thick folder on his desk with a sound like a gunshot. I hired a private investigator. Victor looked up from his computer, annoyed. You did what? Look at these. Now. She spread bank statements and receipts across his desk like evidence at a crime scene. Transfers. Dozens of them. All under Naomi's name, all going to different accounts across the city. Victor's face went pale as he scanned the documents. 50,000 Sadies here. 70,000 there. 35,000. 60,000. Over and over and over. Hundreds of thousands of Sadies, gone. Where is this money going? He asked, his voice hollow. That's exactly what you need to ask her. But I think we both know the answer, Victor. She's scamming you. Just like the others. Just like your ex-wives. She saw you coming from a mile away. Victor's jaw clenched. The old wound tore open, fresh and bleeding. He'd been a fool. Again. He'd trusted someone. Again. And they'd lied to him. Again. That evening, Victor confronted Naomi at dinner. He dropped the folder in front of her plate with a thud that made her jump. Explain these, he said coldly. Naomi looked at the papers, then up at him. The color drained from her face. You went through my accounts? Don't turn this around, Naomi. You've been taking money from our agreement and sending it God knows where. What are you doing with it? I can explain. Then explain. What are all these transfers for? Who are you sending my money to? Naomi stood up slowly, her hand protectively on her belly. I told you from the very beginning. No questions about the money. That was our agreement. That was before I knew you were lying to me. I never lied to you. Then what do you call this? He jabbed his finger at the papers. Hundreds of thousands of Sadies, gone. Where is it, Naomi? Silence hung between them like a blade about to fall. Naomi's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. She kept her chin up, her voice steady. I call it keeping my promise to people you'll never understand. She walked out of the dining room, leaving Victor standing there alone, breathing hard, his hands shaking with anger and betrayal. Mrs. Dopper appeared in the doorway, her face sad. Master Victor. Not now. That night, Victor heard movement upstairs. When he climbed the stairs, he saw Naomi packing her bags in her room, moving slowly because of her pregnant belly. What are you doing? He demanded. Leaving. I can't stay somewhere I'm not trusted. Naomi, we had an agreement. We did. And I kept my end. But I won't stay where I'm accused of being a thief and a liar. I didn't call you a thief. You didn't have to. She walked past him, carrying her small bag, and headed down the stairs. Victor stood frozen at the top, watching her go. Part of him wanted to stop her. Part of him was too hurt, too angry, too convinced she'd betrayed him like all the others. He let her leave. The next morning, Guilt ate at Victor like acid. He went to Naomi's room, planning to apologize, to ask for an explanation, to try to understand. But her room was empty. Her clothes were gone. Her paintings were gone. Then he saw it, lying on the bed like a confession. Her notebook. He picked it up slowly, his hands trembling. He opened to the first page, and his whole world stopped. Written in careful handwriting, Amma, 9 years old, street child, infected leg, needed emergency surgery. Local hospital refused treatment without payment. Amount sent, 45,000 cedis. Below the entry was a photo, carefully taped to the page. A little girl with bright eyes and a bandaged leg, smiling at the camera. Victor's breath caught in his throat. He turned the page. Grace, 17 years old, pregnant, abandoned by family, living on the streets, paid for prenatal care and temporary shelter. Amount sent, 38,000 cedis. Another photo. A teenage girl holding a newborn baby, tears of joy streaming down her face. Page after page after page. Every single, suspicious transfer accounted for. Every name. Every story. Every face. Nana, 12 years old. Brilliant artist. No money for school supplies or tuition. Sent 15,000 cedis for art materials and enrollment fees. Accra, 34. Single mother of 4 children. Facing eviction. Paid 6 months' rent in advance. Amount sent, 52,000 cedis. ESI, 8 years old. Orphan living with elderly grandmother. Needed glasses to see the blackboard at school. Amount sent, 8,000 cedis. Kofi, 6 years old. Severe malnutrition. Hospital bills and 3 months of food assistance. Amount sent, 27,000 cedis. On and on and on. Women, children, families. The invisible people society had forgotten. And Naomi had used every single cedi not to enrich herself, but to save them. At the back of the notebook, there was a handwritten letter. Victor, you gave me money to survive. I used it so others could live. I didn't tell you because I didn't want your gratitude or your praise or your permission. I wanted my kindness to be free. No strings. No credit. No audience. You asked me once why I came back. The truth is, I saw an opportunity to help people who've been invisible their whole lives. The women sleeping on streets. The children digging through garbage for food. The mothers choosing between medicine for their babies or food for the weak. I didn't want to be rich, Victor. I just wanted to make the world a little less cruel. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you. I hope you understand now. Take care of yourself. And our babies. Naomi. Victor collapsed onto the bed, the notebook clutched against his chest. Silent tears streamed down his face, years of cynicism cracking open to reveal the raw wound underneath. He'd been so wrong, so completely, devastatingly wrong. It took Victor 3 days to find her. He searched the shelters, asked questions on the streets, followed leads that went nowhere. Finally, someone told him about a run-down building in the poorest neighborhood of Accra, where a pregnant woman was teaching children to paint. When he arrived, he found her in the middle of a room filled with color and life. Children sat on the floor with brushes and paper, creating messy, beautiful art. The walls were covered in murals, handprints, flowers, dreams painted in bright primary colors. Naomi stood in the center of it all, 7 months pregnant with twins, showing a little boy how to blend yellow and blue to make green. Victor stood in the doorway, watching her. She looked up and saw him. Her smile faded. She excused herself and walked over, wiping paint from her hands. "What are you doing here?" she asked quietly. "I read your notebook." "Then you know everything." "You lied to me," he said. Naomi's jaw tightened. "No, I just didn't tell you because I knew you wouldn't understand." "You're right. I didn't understand." He paused, his throat tight. "But I do now." She searched his face, looking for anger. Instead, she found regret, admiration, shame. "I'm sorry," Victor said, his voice breaking. "I should have trusted you. I should have known you were different." "Why would you? Two ex-wives who only wanted your money. I don't blame you for being suspicious. I just couldn't stay where I wasn't trusted. But you weren't like them. You never were. And I was too broken to see it." A little girl with bright eyes tugged on Naomi's dress. "Miss Naomi, is this man your husband?" Naomi smiled softly and knelt down to the girl's level. "No, sweetheart. He's a friend." Victor looked at the little girl and his heart stopped. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Amma." His breath caught. The first name in the notebook. The 9-year-old with the infected leg. She was here, healthy and whole and smiling. The girl giggled and ran back to her painting. Victor stood up slowly, looking around at all the children. "How many of them are here?" 12 children. 8 women. "This building is temporary. We'll be evicted again in 2 months. But we'll find another place. We always do." "What if you didn't have to worry about evictions anymore?" "What do you mean?" "I own 3 properties in this city. One of them has been sitting empty for 2 years because I couldn't figure out what to do with it. It's yours." Naomi stared at him. "Victor, on one condition." Her expression shifted to caution. "Here it comes," she thought. "The catch." "Let me help you," Victor said. "Really help you. Not just with money. With everything. Let me build something with you. A real shelter. A proper school. A medical clinic. A place where these children and women don't just survive, but actually thrive. Let me be part of this." Tears spilled down Naomi's cheeks. "Why would you do that?" "Because you taught me something I'd forgotten a long time ago. That wealth isn't what you keep. It's what you give. That the point of having everything isn't to hold on to it, but to use it to help people who have nothing." Naomi wiped her tears with the back of her paint-stained hand, then smiled through them. "Okay. Okay. Yes. Let's build it together." 6 months later, the Haven officially opened its doors. A beautiful 3-story building with classrooms filled with books and computers. An art studio with natural light and professional supplies. A library where children could disappear into other worlds. A medical clinic staffed by real doctors. And housing for 50 women and children, with clean beds and hot meals and safety. Victor stood in the main hall on opening day, watching children paint murals on freshly painted walls. Women attended computer classes, learning skills that could change their futures. Babies played in a bright, clean nursery with toys and music and laughter. Naomi appeared beside him, holding 2 swaddled babies. A boy and a girl. His children. Their children. "They're awake," she said softly. Victor looked down at the twins. They were perfect. Tiny and fragile and beautiful. His daughter had Naomi's eyes. His son had his nose. "Have you chosen names?" he asked. "I have. I wanted to name them after the first 2 children I helped. The ones who started everything. Amma and Nana. Victor's throat tightened with emotion. That's perfect. Naomi handed him his daughter, Amma. He held her carefully, like she might shatter if he breathed too hard. She yawned and wrapped her tiny fingers around his thumb, and Victor felt his heart crack wide open. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For showing me what it means to be rich. Really rich. Not in money, but in purpose." Naomi smiled and shifted baby Nana in her arms. "You showed me something too." "What's that?" "That sometimes the most broken people are the ones who learn how to build the most beautiful things. That it's never too late to change, to choose differently, to become someone who gives instead of just takes." They stood there together, surrounded by the sounds of hope and healing. Two broken people who'd found their way to wholeness in the most unexpected place, through a bargain that started as a transaction and became a transformation. Victor looked around at the haven, at the children whose lives were being forever changed, at the woman who'd changed his life by refusing to be what he expected. "This is just the beginning," he said. "I know," Naomi replied, rocking baby Nana gently. And for the first time in 40 years, Victor Mensah knew exactly what he was living for. Not for wealth or status or legacy in the traditional sense, but for this, for the laughter of children who'd been given a chance, for the hope in the eyes of women who'd been seen and valued, for the tiny fingers wrapped around his thumb, reminding him that the greatest investments aren't measured in sadies, but in changed lives. The haven's doors stayed open. The children kept painting. The women kept learning. And Victor and Naomi kept building, side by side, proving that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come from the most unexpected bargains. If this story touched your heart, don't just scroll away. Take 1 second to hit that like button. It really helps more people find these stories. Subscribe if you haven't already, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read every single one, and your support keeps this channel alive. This is Folktale Window, where stories remind us that kindness still exists. Until next time, stay kind, stay human.